Hello, HERstorians. I'm your host, Heather Ashley, and welcome to Episode 1, Season 2 of Women of HERstory, a podcast still dedicated to celebrating women who have made or are making their mark on our society. Returning this season is, of course, your favorite co-host, Detective Saddlewack. What's your New Year's resolution for 2021?
Whack! How's everyone doing? It's your favorite detective here, searching for crimes in history or HERstory, whichever one I end up finding first. My New Year's resolution, thank you very much for asking. My New Year's resolution is to work on some of the mental health issues that I've been dealing with and that I've already been addressing. And I wish for everyone else to be able to address their mental health issues and problems that they might be dealing with this year. You know, it's been a crazy year. It's been a crazy 5 years so far in the past week. You know, we've gone through a lot in this past decade and in the last week.
Yeah, no, I love that resolution. And I think it's brave that you want to share that with our listeners. And I know this sounds like an ad for BetterHelp. It's not, but yeah, everybody get out there.
It's a crazy year.
Get help.
It's a crazy time. Everyone needs help. Don't do it alone. I know everyone's had a tough year in the past week, but I think we could all afford to reach out to someone, maybe, check on either someone else or maybe...
reach out to a counselor.
And get
no
that
judgment.
help that you might need.
Yeah, I love that.
Definitely don't do it alone.
You
are not alone.
That's
We're never
amazing.
alone.
I love that. That's so important.
What's your New Year's resolution?
My New Year's resolution is to take the days as they come and not be so controlling in my day.
Y'all hear that?
Yeah, I'm a little too rigid. I'm not always. I'm a free spirit, but I also, should allow for the day to go where it's going to go and not have such a rigid idea of how everything's going to work out. It's great. It's good. And I won't overcommit to projects that will stress me out. Haha. That's a big one for me, guys.
So we had a nice end of the year. We hope y'all had a nice end of your year, however it was.
We're so excited to share with you all.
Super excited.
We're so excited to share with you all some incredible pieces of HERstory this year. We have some incredible guests on the roster, as well as a few new bells and whistles. We mentioned last year that we would be starting the new year with some new features on the website, but we must confess, and by we I mean I, that the new website is still under construction, but HERstory.com is still up and running with all of its usual features, so that's still available for you guys to go and look at. Now that all of that is out of the way, let's fly right into today's HERstory lesson about the Night Witches of World War II.
Oh.
The 588th Night Bomber Regiment that dropped more than 23,000 tons of bombs on Nazi targets.
I knew there was, witchcraft involved in during World War II. I was like, no way, everything was just man-made. There had to be some sort of magic. I was, some of those things just look a little suspicious, so... I'm interested in your witch story.
Well, this fierce group of women flew plywood biplanes that were exposed to bullets and frostbite in the air and skepticism and sexual harassment on the ground.
That sounds like some kind of magic, but I don't know what.
These women were feared and hated so much by the Nazis that they would award German airmen who downed one of the Night Witches' planes the prestigious Iron Cross Medal. So why the name Night Witches? The Germans nicknamed them Nachthexen, which is night witches in German. They nicknamed them this because the whooshing noise the wooden planes made sounded like sweeping brooms.
Yeah, that sounds I was just thinking about that while you were explaining it. What a creepy thing to hear at night.
I know.
You know, you're just that noise and you're looking up with your gun in your hand like, what?
What is happening?
This is not a plane.
Steve Prowse, author of screenplay The Night Witches, said, "The sound was the only warning the Germans had. Mm-hmm. The planes were too small to show up on the radar or infrared locators. They never used radios, so radio locators couldn't pick them up either. They were basically ghosts."
Can you imagine that the enemy forces actually got rewarded for taking one of them down? Like
Because that's how much they could. That's how much damage they did.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's how much of a feat like it was for them. Like that's how strong. That's how
impactful. Yeah. Think about the time period, and specifically the roles women were playing in the war around the world. Female pilots weren't exactly the first choice. Women were barred from combat initially, but the encroaching enemy made the Soviets rethink the policy. Hitler had launched an invasion of the Soviet Union called Operation Barbarossa in June of 1941. By fall, the Germans were pressing on Moscow. Leningrad was under siege, and the Red Army was struggling. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment was created by Marina Raskova, a.k.a. Soviet Amelia Earhart. She was the first female navigator in the Soviet Air Force, she set long-distance flight records. In 1938, she and 2 other women set the world record for a nonstop direct flight by women.
Wow.
She flew an AN-37, a Soviet-built twin-engine aircraft, named Rodina after her homeland.
Oh.
She flew 6,000 kilometers from Moscow to Komsomolsk-on-Amur. I'm so sorry. We're back on bad pronunciations. I'm working, guys. On the southeastern tip of Siberia. As she was flying over Siberia, she started icing up and struggling to gain altitude. They threw everything they could out of the plane and still lost altitude.
Damn.
A crash was inevitable until they could further lighten the plane. Marina was the navigator on this flight, and after pointing out their position on a map, she bailed out into the darkness of Siberia. The 2 remaining women landed safely at their initial destination, and a hunter rescued Marina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I figured when nothing else was left on the plane, one of them would have to.
She was like, bye. And she was awarded Hero of the Soviet Union for her record-breaking flight. I love it so much. She's so amazing. Marina received letters from women all over the Soviet Union wanting to join the World War II effort in more than just the traditional supporting roles, but wanting to be gunners and pilots flying on their own. They had lost brothers, partners, and had seen their homes and villages ravaged. Marina petitioned Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin to form an all-female fighting squadron, and her accomplishments and visibility helped her to persuade Stalin to form the 3 regiments of the 588th Regiment.
Imagine being able to reason with a person like that for like feminist rights to fight. I mean, you know, I'm glad she was able to appeal to his senses.
Yeah. And also kind of crazy that, like, he's the one who was the first in this, you know, modern era to do that. One of the letters that Marina had received was from Nadezhda Popova, a trained pilot who was turned down when she tried to enlist in the military as a pilot initially. Albert Axel, the author of Russia's Heroes 1941-45, said, "No one in the armed services wanted to give women the freedom to die." Ooh, that's such a crazy way to put it.
Yeah.
On October 8th, 1941, Stalin gave orders to deploy 3 all-female Air Force units. They were to fly missions and drop bombs and theoretically return fire. The Soviet Union was the first nation to allow women to engage in combat. They were previously only allowed to transfer planes and ammunition, and then the men would take it from there.
Oh.
The units received more than 2,000 applications.
Wow.
Yeah. They ended up selecting about 400 women for each of the 3 units, consisting of mainly students from ages 17 to 26.
There were a lot of young women who were trying to participate in this.
Mm-hmm. Selected applicants moved to Engels, a small town north of Stalingrad, for training at the Engels School of Aviation. They had an extremely compressed education, only having a few months to learn and master what usually takes several years. They were training to perform as pilots, navigators, maintenance, and ground crew. They were like, all right, you all have to do it all, so good luck.
I mean, yeah.
Male military personnel believed that they added little to the combat efforts. The men didn't like that the little girls were going to the front line. It was a man's thing, said Prowse.
Boo.
I know.
It's a man's thing to die. Get out of here. Find your own thing.
The military provided the women with brand new, fitting uniforms and state-of-the-art planes to give them the best chance at performing well. Just kidding. They offered them hand-me-downs.
Damn.
The uniforms were from male soldiers, including oversized boots. They had to tear up their bedding and stuff them into their boots to get them to fit, according to Prowse.
Stupid.
For the planes, they were given Polycarpov PO2, a 1920s crop duster that was just supposed to be used as a training vehicle. It was a 2-seater open cockpit plane that was never intended for combat. It was like a coffin with wings.
I can't believe that they actually had the audacity to fly those. To send the women out to fly
they don't
those.
care about them.
That's just kind of,
yeah.
that doesn't
It's
even
insane.
seem,
It doesn't
even regardless of the gender, that just doesn't seem like a tactical thing.
Yeah, like, give them a
you
chance.
Or
it's
give
crazy.
them something more modern. That's...
It was the planes were plywood with canvas pulled over with zero protection from the elements.
I mean, this just doesn't even...
At night, they would encounter freezing temperatures, wind, and frostbite. Think about the harsh Soviet winter. The planes would reach temperatures so low that touching them would rip off your bare skin.
I believe that.
The plane's limited weight capacity and military funds meant that they didn't get the, quote, luxury items that their male counterparts had. You know, like parachutes, radars, guns, and radios.
What a funny thing. Luxury items in war is just a parachute. It's just things that will help you die a little less faster.
Luxury items are necessary items that they only budgeted for the men to have.
Yeah, but when we think of luxury, it's like...
Yeah, no, of course. But
cool,
that when they asked for these things, they were told that they were luxury items that they didn't need. The night witches used rulers, stopwatches, flashlights, pencils, maps, and compasses. The upside to this meant that their maximum speed was literally slower than the stall speed of the Nazi planes. They could maneuver faster than the enemy, making them a harder target. And they could take off and land from most locations. The downside being rather obvious. Under enemy fire, they had to literally duck their head, and send the planes into dives, and almost none of them had defensive ammunition.
I wonder if any of the planes would ever, if their Russian planes, like the old planes, would come up on, like, GPS. You know what I mean?
No, they didn't. There's no radars.
Good.
That's the whole thing.
That's so good.
Yeah, they couldn't be detected.
That's excellent. Except for every other part that came with the flying.
If they were hit with a tracer bullet that had a pyrotechnic charge, the wood plane would just burst into flames.
Yeah, it's a wrap.
They could only carry 2 bombs at a time. Some sources said 1, but more said 2. 1 under each wing. They would send 40 2-person crews at night. Each made 8 to 18 missions at night. They would fly back to rearm between runs. The weight of the bombs made them fly at lower altitudes, making them easier targets and forced them to fly night-only missions. The pilot was up front, the navigator in back, and they traveled in packs. The first plane flew as bait to attract the German spotlight, which would provide illumination. Keep in mind, they have 0 ammo. They would release a flare to light up the intended target. The last plane in the pack would idle their engine and glide in darkness to the bombing areas. This was the stealth mode that was responsible for their signature witch's broom sound.
Whoa, okay, high tech. Stealth mode, oh boy.
Just turning off the engine.
Oh goodness.
Just literally idling the engine.
We are in the future, people.
Almost every time we had to sail through a wall of enemy fire, said Popova.
Yeah.
She flew 852 missions and died at the age of 91 on July 8th, 2013.
Oh, she was living on borrowed time. That's crazy. How did she I can't believe she made it through all her missions. I wonder how many other women
we'll get there.
survived? Oh, you have the number?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. She was inspired by patriotism and revenge. Her brother was killed after Germans swept into the Soviet Union in 1941, and the Nazis commandeered their home as a Gestapo police station. So she was like, no, fam, I'm gonna drop bombs on you.
That's what she said.
That's basically what she
Verbatim.
said.
Wow, man.
In the book, Flying for Her Country, the American and Soviet Women Military Pilots of World War II by Amy Goodpaster Streb, Popova was quoted recalling the smiling faces of the Nazi pilots as they strafed crowds, gunning down fleeing women and children. She was the deputy commander of the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. And in a 2010 interview with Russian news service RIA Novosti, she said, "We bombed, we killed. It was all part of a war. We had an enemy in front of us, and we had to prove that we were stronger and more prepared." Popova said to Ms. Streb when she was asked why she decided to learn how to fly, she said, "I was a very lively, energetic, wild kind of person. I loved to tango, foxtrot, but I was bored. I wanted something different. And at age 15, she joined a flying club."
15.
Yeah. This is before the war. So she's just already, yeah. So, but still, yeah.
15. I don't even think I was able to, like...
Were you getting your learner's permit
I
yet?
don't even... Oh, I definitely didn't have my learner's permit. I don't even think I was able to, like, walk home. Like, my parents didn't even want me to walk home alone. They were like, take the MTA bus home. Don't, like, straight home.
Don't walk.
And I was like, take the bus home? How is that safer? At least I'm by myself. 15 on the bus with random people. 15. And she's flying.
Yeah.
15. Your boy's on a bus.
There were 150 flying clubs in the Soviet Union, and more than a quarter of the students were women. The 588th first mission was June 28, 1942. They took successful aim at the headquarters of the invading Nazi force. During Popova's first mission, a Soviet plane was destroyed, killing 2 of her friends. Popova dropped bombs on the dots of lights below and returned to her base. She said, "I was ordered to fly another mission immediately. It was the best thing to keep me from thinking about it." And she said this to Russian Life magazine in 2003. After being downed once, she found herself among retreating troops and civilians. There, she met a wounded fighter pilot, Semyon Kharlamov. He was reading A Quiet Flows the Dawn by Mikhail A. Sholokhov. And the two struck up a conversation where she ended up reading him some poetry. They were separated, but saw each other several times during the war. They planned to meet at Reichstag in Berlin, scribbled their name on the wall, and then married soon after. She's
Make
gushing.
A movie. She's gushing. That's
what a wild thing to think about. Like if I saw that happen in a movie, I wouldn't believe it, right? Because like she's a downed pilot, he is also down, and then they end up meeting because he's reading a book that she likes and wants to read him some poetry while they're fleeing the Nazi troops. And then they just meet up randomly throughout the war. And then at the end of it, they're like, "You lived, I lived, let's get married."
Yeah, there's something nice and sweet and Hollywood-esque about it.
That's just crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Why are you so skeptical?
I don't. I could see it being like a movie trope, and that's why I'm just
not
like,
even just but it's real life. Like, that's what makes it crazier.
Right, and somehow I could just see this being like a Tom Hanks kind of film. Like I'm just like, oh God,
too wholesome.
Tom Hanks again, finding a loved one in Berlin after World War II. Okay, we get it. You're the best actor. Tired of it. Thinks he's the best.
There were 12 commandments that the Night Witches followed, and the first was be proud you are a woman. Killing Germans was their job, but they enjoyed needlework, patchwork, they decorated their planes, and they danced. They even used their navigation pencils as eyeliner sometimes. Isn't that awesome?
I mean, you gotta be creative.
And I did my best. I went down a hole for probably about 8 hours trying to find the rest of the commandments, and they are unavailable. No one has them, and I wonder if it was like a pact to keep them super, super secret, except the first one.
I can't believe you did all this research for the episode and you couldn't find the commandments for
The rest of them?
for myself and the listeners.
Why are you mean to me on this
Goodness,
episode?
people,
Why
I
are you
will
being
make
so
sure.
mean to
I
me
will
on
make
this
sure.
episode?
Second episode, I
God.
will make sure that she has all her ducks in a row.
The last mission the Night Witches flew was May 4th, 1945. They flew within 60 kilometers, which is 37 miles, of Berlin, and 3 days later, the Germany officials surrendered. The Germans had two theories about why the women were so successful. One, they were all criminals, masters at stealing, and had been sent to the front lines as punishment. Two, they were given special injections that allowed them to see in the night.
You know, it's obviously the injections. How could they be witches? You know what I mean? They couldn't actually be witches. They were all injected. It's a super soldier serum. Saw a whole season about it on X-Files.
But isn't that so funny that they were like, no way could women be able to just be good pilots and good
it has to be
combat officers. It has to be that they're criminals.
That's such an insult to, like, their own women. Like, surely our women can do that. How did their women do that?
Yeah, our women could never. Yeah.
Our women can never be as useful and talented.
Honestly.
What are they doing over there?
Must be injections and thieves.
Like if every German woman heard that when they said that, they'd be like,
yeah.
They probably just did a better job than the men because duh.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. The incomparable Night Witches flew over 30,000 missions in total. 800 per pilot and navigator. They lost only 30 pilots. And that's out of 403 regiments. Like 1,200 women, only 30 were lost.
Well, you know, when you have women on the job, most of the time it's successful.
And
very little, casualties or issues.
Yeah, and 24 of their flyers were awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. Raskova, our Shiro, who was responsible for the creation of this regiment, died on January 4th, 1943. She was sent to the front line, and her plane never made it back. She was given the very first state funeral of World War II, and her ashes were buried in the famed Kremlin Wall.
Well, that's nice of them to do that at least. I mean, we can only give them so much, but it's nice that they did that much.
Yeah. The Night Witches were the most highly decorated unit in the Soviet Air Force during the war. They disbanded 6 months after the end of World War II. And on the Victory Day parade in Moscow, the Night Witches were front and center. Kidding once again, they weren't even included.
Yeah, I figured you were joking.
It was decided that their planes were too slow for the fanfare. So even though they were the most successful and decorated regiment of the entire Soviet Air Force, they weren't even invited to the Victory Day parade. Because they were given planes that were crop dusters, so they were like, oh, sorry that the planes that you were wildly successful with, they're just too slow for the parade, so.
Good job, but you can't sit with us.
Yeah, just.
You gotta sit there.
Crazy. When looking back on her life, Popova said, I sometimes stare in the blackness and close my eyes. I can still imagine myself as a young girl up there in my little bomber, and I ask myself, Nadia, how did you do it?
You know, it's so funny, and I wonder if it's just because we've been on a little bit of a binge, but I that sounds like a very Moira Rose thing.
Nadia, Moira, how did you do it?
Her asking herself that, like, how do you do it every day? No, but of course, it's absolutely unacceptable that they only were able to be recognized so much, especially directly after the wartime. After they should have been, their war effort should have been more acknowledged. Although,
absolutely,
I guess having at the Kremlin. What was it?
Oh, her ashes buried at the in the Kremlin wall.
At least for her individually, separately,
and
independently.
having the first state funeral. That's
nice.
huge.
I don't know really where women stood prior to this, but I know the Kremlin is like, you know,
for like royals and
I mean,
major
you know, you gotta be
figures,
like KGB, you know, also kind of.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool that they at least acknowledged her that much.
Right.
Although, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting, and I really found this researching this episode kind of crazy because I didn't. The only reason I know about the Night Witches is when we did an episode request swap with the How Did We Not Know That podcast last year. I was looking up like international people that they could do an episode on, and I came across the Night Witches, and just briefly, and listening to their episode made me want to like further research it and bring it to you guys. And there were things that like the book that I only read a few excerpts, but the one that's about the women pilots around the world of World War II, that's something that like I was never taught that there were female pilots in World War II. I had no idea that there were entire regiments of female pilots.
Yeah.
And so I was in this like crazy hole of, not even hole, this crazy like amazing valley. Right, of
amazing valley. I was in a hidden valley of information and dressing.
And ranch dressing. But no, it was such an interesting episode to research. And
no, it was equally as interesting to learn about it. You know, I think we only hear so much about like the main, or like quote unquote the main parts of like World War II. So it's like France falling,
and then Russia's all the women being back home,
what happened in Japan, and then the women kind of having new
Rosie Riveter and all of that,
right, and then all the men having to like
do all that other stuff versus
right,
it
and
being,
then the U.S. government's like, save all your metal and your steel, we need it for the war effort.
Yeah, we learn like those types of things.
We learned about like women in the U.S. who are like
taking care of the homestead while the
or
people
being
are away.
less quote unquote domesticated and like actually taking to the workforce because all the men were having to fight. Yeah. So they were like, we need women to work, and then the men came back, and then the government's like, well, let's go while last, and you know, get to it, whatever you want to, as you were, you know, back to whatever you were doing.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're not told that, you know, there were also women who were part of the actual combat force, and I wonder if that was strictly because, well, I actually don't know if there were women in the U.S. who were part of the. I don't know when that ban was lifted
that's
on
for another
women
episode.
in combat.
I think that's for another episode. I can hear the people, the listeners, they're clamoring for another episode.
Saying,
of
next
this.
episode,
or they're saying stop, please.
Well, thank you, Herstoryans, for tuning in to episode 1 of season 2 of Women of HERstory.
You made it! Woo 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 woo! Slap!
Whack!
Whack!
Detective Pat, what did I call you? Paddle whack or something? Come back this Friday for the first interview of the season. We have graphic novelist and freelance letterer for DC Comics, Gabriella Downey.
Whoa.
Yeah. In this interview, she talks about getting through toxic and unsafe work environments, working with DC Comics, why she's writing her own graphic novel, and so much more. Before you skedaddle, subscribe for the show, tell your friends, so that we can keep growing and share these awesome stories with as many people as possible. Follow us on the social medias, Twitter at
The HERstory Pod,
Instagram at
Women of HERstory Podcast,
and visit our website at
ofherstory.com.
Until next week, be safe, stay healthy, and show the world what you're made of.
Wear a mask. Whack!